This is Heliox, where evidence meets empathy. Independent, moderated, timely, deep, gentle, clinical, global, and community conversations about things that matter. Breathe easy. We go deep and lightly surface the big ideas.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Deep Dive. We're diving into some pretty heavy stuff today.
Yeah, no kidding.
But it's stuff you guys really want to get a handle on, right? I mean, you're here because you want to know what's really going on.
Exactly. You want to cut through all that noise and really get to the heart of the matter.
And today, we're looking at something that could have some pretty huge implications for Europe.
This is, let's see, part 2 of a 3-part series.
Right, from April 1st, 2025.
Yeah, April 1st. And it's really focused on this idea that the relationship between the U.S. and Europe could be in for some serious trouble.
Yeah, like potentially even a real split.
Yeah, a real fracture.
Yeah.
And the scenario we're diving into today is, it's called escalation.
Right, escalation. So basically what we're going to be trying to figure out is what could this escalation scenario actually look like for Europe, and what are the main areas that are going to be, feeling the pressure?
Right. And the report really digs into 3 key areas: geopolitics, technology, and the economy.
Yeah, those are the big ones.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's really important to kind of start by understanding the context that this report is coming from.
Right.
It basically says that, ever since like 2014, there's been this pattern of people kind of underestimating geopolitical risks,
Yeah.
And they see a second Trump administration as something that could really accelerate that downward spiral. It's not just like a little shift, it's more like a fundamental change in how Washington is approaching foreign policy.
Like a sea change.
Yeah, like a sea change. It's about moving towards like really focusing on power,
Power politics.
Yeah, power politics.
So essentially kind of abandoning that whole post-World War II idea of, shared values and multilateralism.
Exactly. And that's huge, because that's been like the foundation of the relationship between the U.S. and Europe.
Yeah. I mean, if both sides don't even agree on the basic rules of the game anymore, it's hard to see how you can even have a meaningful partnership.
Right. It throws everything into question.
Okay, so let's talk about Ukraine for a minute. I mean, This is kind of the flashpoint right now, right?
Absolutely.
And the report really highlights how, Trump talks about peace. And obviously everyone wants peace, right?
Of course, yeah.
But then it goes on to say that his actions, what he actually does, might suggest that he's actually, okay with using military force as a political tool.
Yeah. And that's the crucial distinction, right? It's not just what he's saying, it's about what he's actually willing to do.
Right. And the report actually points out how dangerous this could be, you know? Like if the U.S. were to pull back its security guarantees to Ukraine.
Yeah. That would be a game changer.
Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't just change the situation in Ukraine. It would basically hand the Kremlin a blank check.
Exactly. They'd be able to dictate the terms of any kind of peace deal.
And this escalation scenario that the report talks about, it's not necessarily about like, a huge war breaking out all of a sudden, right?
Right. It's more nuanced than that.
Yeah. It's more like, what if Trump tries to make deals, but they're bad deals?
Yeah. Or what if you just, can't get anything done at all?
Right.
Yeah.
And then that leads to, one of these conflicts that's already simmering somewhere in Europe's, sphere of influence, that leads to one of them boiling over.
Exactly.
And we're not just talking about like, Western Europe here, right? This sphere of influence it's huge.
Yeah. It's massive. I mean, it covers everything from, the Arctic, the Baltic Sea, the Black Sea.
The Caucasus.
Yeah, the Caucasus, even parts in the Middle East.
Right. It's a big area.
Yeah. And the report argues that, if things escalate in any of these places, it's going to expose all those cracks that already exist between the Western allies,
Yeah. Like it'll be a real stress test for NATO and the EU.
Right. And it could really speed up this whole trend of deglobalization that we've been seeing.
Right. Okay, so the report actually mentions a specific date here, September 2025. That's when Russia is planning to hold its SAPAD military exercise.
Oh, right. SAPAD.
And they're basically going to be simulating attacks on NATO territory.
Yeah. which is pretty provocative to say the least.
Yeah. And it's not just like a hypothetical thing about, the land corridor between Poland and Lithuania,
Right. They're actually deploying Russian and Belarusian troops in Belarus.
like a real show of force.
Yeah, it's definitely a show of force.
So just to be clear for our listeners, these SAPAD maneuvers, Russia does them every few years,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And they're always, big exercises. But the fact that they're going to be focused on attacks against NATO territory this time.
Right, right. Especially with, potentially the U.S. being less committed to NATO.
Yeah, that's a pretty serious signal, right?
It is. It's basically saying to NATO, like, think carefully before you, do anything rash.
Right, right. And if you combine that with this idea of a dictated peace in Ukraine, which the report also talks about.
Yeah, that's where things could really start to spiral.
Right, because then it's not just that Ukraine loses out, it's that it emboldens Russia, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It makes them think, okay, well, we got away with it there, maybe we can push further.
And the report specifically says that, they might try to push further into what they call their near abroad, which is basically the former Soviet territories.
Right, right. And they even say that this could extend to, countries that used to be part of the Warsaw Pact.
Yeah, which would be a huge escalation.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about, potentially NATO members.
Right, exactly.
And the report, it actually gives some specific examples of how Russia is already, ramping up its hybrid tactics in places like the Black Sea.
Yeah. Like they're targeting countries like Moldova and Romania.
Right. And there are even reports from Scandinavian governments about, suspected sabotage in the Baltic Sea.
Yeah. And most people think that Russia is behind that, even though it's, it's hard to prove for sure.
Right, because it's all this gray zone warfare stuff.
Right, exactly. That's the whole point of gray zone warfare.
It's like they're trying to stay below the radar,
Yeah.
They're doing things that are definitely hostile, but they're not, outright military attacks.
Right. It's all about like cyber attacks, disinformation campaigns, economic pressure.
Supporting proxy groups.
Right. All these things that destabilize a country without actually triggering a full-scale war.
Right. And this is where I think it gets really interesting, because the report actually talks about how some people in a potential new Trump administration, they don't seem to be taking these threats very seriously.
Yeah. They actually quote J.D. Vance.
Oh, right.
He says that the biggest threat to Europe is from within.
Yeah, not from Russia or China.
Right, and Steve Witkoff, he apparently dismissed the idea of Russia attacking NATO as absurd.
Absurd.
Yeah, and the report points out that, this is exactly the kind of language that Russia itself uses.
Yeah, I mean, if even the U.S. isn't taking these threats seriously, then who is, right?
Right, and it suggests that there's a really fundamental difference in how the U.S. and Europe see the world,
Yeah, and that difference in perception, it could have some pretty big consequences. Because the report says that, the U.S. might end up making even more concessions to Russia.
Yeah, they even talk about the possibility of the U.S. reconsidering security guarantees for some of the newer NATO members.
Like in Eastern Europe.
Right.
Yeah.
And that would leave countries like the Baltic states, which, were only free from Soviet occupation since 1992.
Right.
It would leave them incredibly vulnerable.
Yeah. And the report says that, the U.S. would probably still have troops in Europe, but their role would change.
Yeah. They'd be more focused on projecting power towards China.
Right. Because China is seen as the main long-term threat, right?
Exactly.
And the report says that the goal is to be ready for a potential conflict with China by 2027.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. That's not that far off.
It's not. No, it's just around the corner.
Right. And there's also this really interesting idea that Trump might actually try to split Russia and China apart.
Oh, like play them off against each other?
Yeah. The report compares it to what Nixon did with China back in 1972.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it's a pretty risky strategy, though, right?
It is, yeah. I mean, it could backfire spectacularly.
Right. And if it doesn't work, then the report says that the whole idea of the U.S. nuclear umbrella protecting Europe, that starts to look a lot weaker.
Yeah. I mean, if the U.S. isn't seen as a reliable partner anymore, then the whole system starts to fall apart.
And in the worst case scenario, the report actually says that the U.S. might even withdraw from NATO completely.
Wow. That would be huge.
Yeah. It would completely change the balance of power in Europe.
Yeah, it would be a whole new world.
Okay, so let's talk about Europe for a minute. I mean,
Oh.
if all this stuff is going on, how are they gonna hold it together?
Right. That's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the report even now is saying that there are already a lot of divisions within Europe, you know.
Yeah. Like you have the Baltic states, Scandinavia, Poland. They're all really worried about Russia.
Right. And then you have other countries like Hungary with Viktor Orban, who's, trying to play both sides.
Right, right. Trying to keep everyone happy.
Yeah, yeah. And if the U.S. does pull back from NATO, that's just going to make those divisions even worse, right?
Absolutely. It's going to be every man for himself.
Yeah, yeah. And the report actually talks about the possibility of some countries, leaving NATO and the EU.
Wow, really?
Yeah. And they even say that you could end up with a rump NATO.
A rump NATO. What does that even mean?
It basically means like just the core members.
Oh, okay.
Like the ones who are really committed to collective defense.
Right, right.
And then maybe the single market in Schengen would still exist
Mm-hmm.
for economic reasons.
Right. But in terms of security, it would be a much weaker Europe.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And the report says that in all this chaos, Russia's probably gonna try to take advantage.
Yeah.
Yeah. It wouldn't be surprising.
Yeah. And they're specifically going to target Germany.
Germany. Why Germany?
Well, I mean, Germany is the economic powerhouse of Europe.
Right.
And if you can destabilize Germany, you can destabilize all of Europe.
So they're gonna use all those hybrid warfare tactics we talked about.
Yeah, exactly. Cyber attacks, disinformation, the whole 9 yards.
Trying to sow discord and weaken Germany from within.
Yeah, yeah. It's a pretty scary thought.
It is, yeah. And it really makes you wonder, who's going to step up and try to stop them.
Right. I mean, if the U.S. is out of the picture, or at least, playing a much smaller role,
Right.
then who's going to be the guarantor of security in Europe?
Yeah. I mean, the report seems to think that it'll come down to France and the UK.
Right, right. The old Entente Cordiale.
Yeah, the Entente Cordiale.
Yeah.
And they'll have to work closely with the northern European countries.
Yeah, like the Scandinavian countries.
Right. Because they're all on the front line, right?
They are. They're the ones who are most exposed to Russian aggression.
Yeah. So it's a pretty big burden for them to carry.
It is. It's a huge responsibility.
Okay, so let's switch gears a little bit and talk about technology, because the report also goes into some detail about the potential technological consequences of this escalation scenario.
Yeah. And it seems like things could get pretty messy in the digital world too.
Yeah. Yeah. And one of the big things that the report talks about is this idea that there could be a real backlash in Europe against American social media companies.
Oh, interesting. Why is that?
Well, basically, the report says that Europe is getting fed up with how these companies are handling disinformation.
Yeah, yeah. Especially, disinformation that's coming from states like Russia.
Right. And they're saying that these companies aren't doing enough to stop it.
Mm-hmm.
And it actually says that there could be new laws in Europe to ban platforms like X and Facebook.
Wow. Okay. That would be a huge deal.
Yeah. I mean, those are some of the biggest social media platforms in the world.
Right.
And if Europe bans them, it could trigger a real trade war with the U.S.,
Yeah. I mean, a Trump administration, they're not gonna take that line down.
No, they're gonna retaliate. And the report says that they might actually try to block Europe from accessing American cloud services.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And that'd be a massive problem for European businesses, right?
Yeah. I mean, they rely on those services for everything.
Yeah, for everything. And suddenly they'd have to scramble to find alternatives.
Right.
And the report says that they might have to turn to Chinese companies.
Chinese companies. Oh, that's risky, right?
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
Because there are all sorts of concerns about security and data privacy when it comes to Chinese companies.
Right.
So it's a real dilemma for Europe.
Yeah. And even if they do find alternatives, the report says that it's probably going to be, more expensive.
Yeah. And there might not even be enough capacity.
Right.
Because European cloud providers, they're just not, as big as the American ones.
Right.
So it's a real mess.
It is, yeah. And on top of all that, Europe is already really worried about cybersecurity.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, they're constantly getting hit by cyber attacks.
Right. And if the relationship with the U.S. gets worse, the report says that those attacks are just going to get more frequent and more sophisticated.
Right, right. Because the U.S. and Europe, they cooperate a lot on cybersecurity, right?
Yeah, they do.
But if that cooperation breaks down, then Europe is going to be much more vulnerable.
Exactly.
And there's this other really interesting thing that the report talks about.
What's that?
It's about ransomware gangs.
Oh, yeah, those guys.
Yeah, yeah. And a lot of these gangs, they're believed to have ties to Russia, right?
Right.
And the report says that if Trump gets elected, these gangs might actually stop attacking the U.S.
Really? Why would they do that?
Well, kind of like a tacit agreement, you know?
Oh, okay.
Like they'll leave the U.S. alone, and in return, the U.S. will, turn a blind eye to what they're doing in Europe.
So basically, Europe would become the main target.
Exactly.
And that would put a huge strain on European cybersecurity, right?
Yeah, yeah. Both for governments and for businesses.
Right, right.
And finally, in terms of technology, the report talks about AI.
Oh, artificial intelligence.
Right. And specifically about the chips that are needed to run AI systems.
Right. Those are really important.
Yeah. And the report says that Europe could fall behind in the race to get those chips.
Why is that?
Well, because Trump wants to boost AI development in the U.S., right? And he's putting in place all these export restrictions on these chips.
So he's basically saying that only countries that are close allies of the U.S. are going to get them.
Yeah, pretty much.
And that could leave Europe in a really tough spot.
Yeah. I mean, they're going to be at a real disadvantage when it comes to developing their own AI capabilities.
Yes, right.
So it's a pretty bleak picture for Europe in terms of technology, too.
Yeah, doesn't sound good.
Okay, so let's move on to the economic consequences of this escalation scenario.
Okay.
And one of the first things that the report talks about is the potential for even more Ukrainian refugees.
Oh, right, because if the security situation in Ukraine gets worse.
Yeah, then more people are going to try to flee to safety.
And a lot of them are going to head west towards Europe.
Exactly. And that's going to put a huge strain on European countries, right?
Yeah, it's going to stretch their social welfare systems and their labor markets to the limit.
Right. And it's also going to make the political divisions within Europe even worse. Yeah.
Right. Because some people are going to be more sympathetic to the refugees and some people are going to be, more worried about the economic impact.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a really complex situation.
It is. Yeah.
And then there's the issue of defense spending.
Oh, right.
Because if Europe feels like it's got to do more to defend itself.
Yeah.
Then they're going to have to spend more money on their militaries.
And that's going to be tough, especially for countries that are already struggling economically.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the report says that they're probably going to have to abandon all those deficit and debt limits that they've been trying to stick to.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. And that could really threaten the stability of the euro,
Yeah. I mean, the euro is already kind of fragile.
Yeah. Yeah. And this would just make things worse.
And the report specifically says that it's going to cause problems because of the differences between the northern European economies and the southern European economies.
Right. The north is much stronger economically.
Yeah.
And the south is much more indebted.
Right. Right.
So if they all have to start spending more on defense, it's going to create a real imbalance.
And that's going to make it really hard for the European Central Bank to manage the euro. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. Because they're going to have to try to find a monetary policy that works for both the North and the South.
Right.
And that's going to be almost impossible.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
And the report says that this could lead to a loss of confidence in the euro. And that could trigger a devaluation of the euro.
Oh, wow. So basically the euro would be worth less.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. Then what happens?
Well, the report says that people would start moving their money out of euros into other things,
Like what?
Like real estate, gold, and especially the U.S. dollar.
Oh, right, because the dollar is seen as a safe haven.
Yeah, yeah, but here's the weird thing.
What's that?
The report says that the U.S. might actually be worried about the dollar getting too strong.
Really?
Yeah.
Why would they be worried about that?
Well, because if the dollar's too strong, it makes American exports more expensive.
Right.
And that could hurt American businesses. So the report says that the U.S. might actually try to weaken the dollar.
How would they do that?
Well, They could impose capital controls, which would basically make it harder to move money into the U.S.
Oh, okay.
And they could also, print more money.
Oh, right. That would devalue the dollar.
Yeah, exactly.
But wouldn't other countries get mad about that?
They probably would.
Yeah.
And the report says that they might not be willing to cooperate with the U.S. this time.
Oh.
In the past, there have been agreements between countries to manage their currencies together.
Right.
But the report says that might not happen this time.
So it could lead to a currency war, basically.
Yeah, potentially.
Wow.
And all of this, it could lead to the global trading system basically falling apart.
Yeah. I mean, if everyone is just looking out for themselves, then the whole system breaks down.
Right. And the report says that the World Trade Organization, the WTO,
right,
it could become completely irrelevant.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, because the U.S. and Europe, they would basically be ignoring all the rules.
And that would lead to more regional trade blocks, right?
Yeah.
Where countries are just trading with their neighbors and allies.
Right.
And trying to reduce their dependence on the global economy.
Yeah. So it's a pretty bleak picture overall.
It is, yeah. It's a lot to take in.
Yeah, it is.
But the report does offer a little bit of hope.
Oh, okay. What's that?
Well, it says that some people in Europe might actually welcome this breakdown of the global order.
Really, who?
Well, it says that nationalist parties, both on the left and the right, they might actually see this as a positive thing.
Why?
Well, because they're generally skeptical of global institutions,
Right.
And they want their countries to be more independent.
Yeah. They wanted to take back control.
Exactly.
So they might actually be happy to see the old system crumble.
Yeah. And they might not be as worried about the risks of escalation as other people are. Right.
But the report also offers another interpretation of what's going on.
Okay.
It says that maybe all these concessions that the U.S. is making to Russia, maybe that's just a way of testing the waters.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, like they're trying to see if Russia is actually interested in a more cooperative relationship.
And if they're not,
then the U.S. might actually get tougher.
Oh, okay.
Like they might adopt a peace through strength approach.
Yeah, like show Russia that they mean business.
Right. And there's some evidence that this might be happening already.
Oh, really? Like what?
Well, the report mentions that the U.S. has been doing more reconnaissance missions over the Black Sea.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. And that could be a sign that they're trying to send a message to Russia.
Right.
But ultimately, the report says that a lot depends on what happens in the U.S.
Right. Like how strong is American democracy?
Yeah. Will the Republicans support Trump if he keeps trying to appease Russia?
Right. Or will they push back?
Yeah, that's a big question.
It is, yeah.
But regardless of what happens in the U.S., the report has a really clear message for Europe.
What's that?
They need to get their act together.
Yeah, they need to be prepared to defend themselves.
Exactly. They need to strengthen their own defenses and make sure that their democracies are strong and resilient.
Right. They can't just rely on the U.S. anymore.
No. They have to be able to stand on their own 2 feet.
Yeah. And that's a tough message for some European countries to hear.
Yeah, it is. But it's the reality of the situation.
So that's the escalation, the scenario.
That's one possible future for Europe.
And it's not a very pretty one.
No, it's not. But at least now you guys have a better understanding of what the risks are.
Yeah.
And as always, thanks for joining us on the Deep Dive.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for listening today. 4 recurring narratives underlie every episode: boundary dissolution, adaptive complexity, embodied knowledge, and quantum-like uncertainty. These aren't just philosophical musings, but frameworks for understanding our modern world. We hope you continue exploring our other podcasts, responding to the content, and checking out our related articles at helioxpodcast.substack.com.